Hi, this is topic 5, complexity leadership. Complexity leadership and complexity leadership theory, or CLT, is an emerging contemporary leadership practice. And it's emerging because we are coming into a much more complex world, and a world of volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. The chapter by Kletzer and Kaufman really builds the case for complexity leadership and the practice of that, building it on Western's eco-leadership approach. And so they argue, as do other theorists and practitioners, and I've put in Mary Albeen and Arena as a reading as well, and a video from Mary Albeen, who has written extensively and researched extensively on complexity leadership theory. And complexity leadership theory is really based on a few tenets. Complex adaptive systems. So we look at emergent leadership. We look at self-organizing systems, local relationships, local and collective relationships, and feedback systems, negative and positive feedback systems, and also the interdependence with the external environment as well. So it's really concerned with an open system approach. Both of the required readings will give you a depth of knowledge in complexity leadership, and many of you will wish to continue on looking at this area. The optional readings are also recommended, particularly the one by Peggy Holman in Bush and Marshak. For those of you who are organisational development practitioners, Bush and Marshak are very important because they come from a dialogic perspective, and the whole book by Bush and Marshak and a lot of the articles by Bush and Marshak are very important, because dialogic approaches in organisational development, in leadership development, in organisational communication and change are more and more important. And the article by Peggy Holman, which is about complexity, self-organisation and emergence, is particularly insightful. And for those of you who are interested in going to a more depth level and looking at the current debates on leadership studies, you can't go past Dennis Turish's article, Is Complexity Leadership Theory Complex Enough? So it's a critical appraisal of complexity leadership theory. So you might want to read that one. There's quite a lot of information that we've included here about complexity leadership theory, and as I said, Mary Albeen's information is really important. I've also just popped in a video as well. I thought this was particularly important video by David Snowden on the Cynefin, it's a Welsh name, framework, which is a framework that's being more and more used to actually look at how we come together to solve problems and to work, to do projects, management, crises, etc. And he recommends that we work in the complicated, complex areas. I urge you to look at this video because it really gives a very strong foundation for this Cynefin framework, which I think is a very important one for all leaders to understand in our increasingly complex world, because we want to look at the good practice to the emergent practice arenas, because more and more we're going to be responding to disorder, and if we sit in the simple, we quite often go over the top into chaos, and we don't want to be working in chaos. So I think a lot of you, particularly who are interested in complexity leadership will really get a lot out of this topic. So really start to look at complex adaptive systems rather than the traditional hierarchical, traditional leadership approaches, because they will respond to our emergent and increasingly volatile environment, and they do redistribute power to the ecosystem and across the organisation. So the notion of increasing complexity in organisations and society is contested, and it is important that contemporary leaders continue to critically question leadership theories in the context of their own practice. So right at the beginning in our first online meeting, I talked about that. There's not just one approach or one practice or one style. Don't be looking for one style that's going to fit all. There's not just one theory. It's going to be a framework for practice that suits you, and it also has to suit the context. It's complex, in one word. I hope you enjoy listening to this. Cheers.